Why did you actually choose Jim's Mowing or gardening?
I guess when I first looked at Jim's Mowing, it was something that I saw as a business that I could scale. Look, having lots of businesses that I'd had to start up from scratch in the past cost a lot of money. It took a lot of time to get that brand recognition, having to take care of the marketing and absolutely everything that came with it. What appealed to me for Jim's Mowing specifically was that it had been in New Zealand here for about 30 years. I'd constantly seen the trailers and the vans. It was basically moving billboards everywhere. I also saw it as very scalable, and what really got my attention was the fixed fees.
Now, the question you get asked from every prospect will get out of the way is, how much will I make?
I think you said one thing here that's really important when a franchisee commits to the business, and it really does come down to that attitude. But if we're to look at numbers, from week one, you should be making a minimum of $2,000 because we have paid for work guarantee in place.
So Ricky, thank you for joining us today in the Jim's Mowing and the Jim's Group podcast. So Ricky's been with Jim's Mowing for a long, long time. I remember meeting Ricky the first time when we flew over to New Zealand to do some footage. I was very impressed with his operation and just what he's been able to do. And now, Ricky, you've moved through the ranks, and I'll let you give a bit of an intro about yourself as well. But just want to say, if you are listening to this, obviously interested in Jim's Mowing franchise in NZ, Ricky's a great person to learn from because he had a massive team when you were doing it, really, really successful now, and you're now running the division pretty much in New Zealand for us. So, Ricky, over to you. What were you doing before Jim's Mowing?
Before Jim's Mowing, I was doing, it couldn't be further away from mowing, actually, or in gardening. I was a music festival promoter, doing stadium-size events. I owned bars and nightclubs, and also co-owned a nationwide music TV station here in New Zealand on Sky TV. So I did that for probably just under 20 years. And then, like a lot of people, when COVID hit, the industry I was in was decimated. And so I was looking for something different. And I came across, like most people, a Jim's Mowing advert on Facebook. And I just started watching lots of videos, and then I inquired about it. And I actually inquired about a few different franchise companies. And one of them, sorry, I won't mention names, but one of them replied maybe 2 weeks later. The Jim's Mowing franchise was within minutes. And the third one, I still haven't heard back from. So I've sort of given up. And that really sort of got my attention at the start. It's just, my business was important, and my inquiry was treated very professionally. And then from there, because we're still in lockdown at this stage, so a few video meetings, the second lockdown finished, I met with the franchisor and got started in mowing.
Completely different for you because a massively different career. So why did you actually choose Jim's Mowing or gardening? Because completely left field from what you're doing originally. Did you have an interest in it, or you just wanted to do something completely different, or what was it?
Yeah, look, I guess like a lot of people, there was an interest in it, and I guess that interest came from just mowing my own lawn, or doing some basic gardening. I also enjoyed sort of getting outside and during daylight hours. My old industry was a nighttime industry for the majority, and so I was living opposite ends of the day to most people. And so I guess when I first looked at Jim's Mowing, although I did enjoy mowing, it was something that I saw as a business that I could scale. Look, having lots of businesses that I'd had to start up from scratch in the past cost a lot of money. It took a lot of time to get that brand recognition, and, having to take care of the marketing and absolutely everything that came with it. What appealed to me for Jim's Mowing specifically was that it had been in New Zealand here for about 30 years. I'd constantly seen the trailers and the vans on the road on a daily basis. So we had these, it was basically moving billboards everywhere I went. And the other thing that really sort of, I guess, got my attention is I knew that when I was going to go into this, I wouldn't have to explain what we did or what the brand was. It was self-explanatory, and that's a big, I guess, advantage from running your own business, and having to build those up. I also saw it as very scalable. And what really got my attention was the fixed fees, and there was no royalty deals in place. And I knew that if I followed the system after I'd done the training and I worked hard, I could scale my business.
And you did scale. So what was your peak of your business when you were a franchisee? How many staff did you have, and how big was it?
Yeah, look, I had, staff-wise, I had a team of 6 at its peak. Look, we weren't all full-time. There was a couple part-timers in there. But what I did have is I had two separate mowing vehicles out there. One guy would just cut lawns all day, another guy would cut another run all day. I'd take care of all the gardening work because I'd quoted that work. And I think it's really important when you're quoting gardening jobs that you're there carrying it out because there's lots of variables involved. So look, I had someone working with me full-time on the gardening, and I had someone running my admin. So that's sort of, I guess, staff numbers wise, where it's at its peak. Customers wise, look, I started off with one territory, and then I decided to get a second territory. What that did enable me to do is I built up a lot of customers in a very confined run, scheduling wise anyway. So at its peak, I guess, with the regular customers, I had about 300. That number would
It's a
fluctuate.
lot. Develop's a big business.
It 300 regulars, okay, but our main focus was really the gardening work. So, I had my guys out there cutting lawns each day, but we were focused on the more lucrative big garden section tidy ups. And that's, I guess, where that's really what spiked the revenue.
Yeah, because 300 regs is a massive business. Because I know I do a lot of these interviews, and most guys might do like 80 to 120, maybe by themselves, and maybe have an offside of doing that. So 300 regs is a pretty big business. So that's huge. Now, so you got to that sort of stage, then you've obviously moved into a regional franchisor type role. So what sort of prompted that? And maybe you explain to people actually what that actually is.
Yeah, okay. So look, I was a franchisee for 3 years, and over that time, a couple opportunities popped up. So one of them was to be, I guess, the franchisor or the franchisee support for the Auckland mowing region. And so what the franchisor's role is basically there for support for the franchisees. So look, I started doing that for quite a while, and then other opportunities came about. And so I then went on to manage some of the other mowing regions around New Zealand, which was the Waikato, Wellington, and the South Island mowing regions. And I was at a stage at that point where I had lost a couple of my key workers. They were always looking to move over to Australia, of all places. And that was just a time for me where I thought I'd start scaling a bit, and I started selling off some splits. I started, and if you don't know what a split is, it's selling off part of or a territory in this case, with a large customer base. And then I decided to actually sell off the entire business because another opportunity had come about with Jim's Group. And I took on a role as the general manager for Jim's Group New Zealand for about 12 months. After that, another opportunity came about. And as you know, Joel, there's always lots of things going on at Jim's Group. And I decided to take on a regional franchisor role for the Waikato, Wellington, and the South Island mowing regions. What I have done on top of that also just recently is I've decided to launch a few of my own territories again. And I've got guys running those for me. And what I've done there is there's certain parts within my region that we have a huge amount of unserviced leads. And we do have franchisees in those areas, but very experienced franchisees no longer taking any job leads. One's been, for example, one in Dunedin. There's a guy that's been down there for nearly 20 years. And then there's another one, I think 10 years plus. They don't take leads. So we had all these unserviced leads effectively ending up with our competition. So what I decided to do is set up a few territories and key spots just so we could hold on to those leads. Also having be a bit more active in those areas is going to encourage growth as well. So I'll be basically selling off these territories at some point when we've got a suitable new franchisee that comes on board in those areas.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned an area there, but where do you need franchisees as a priority? So anyone listening to this, which sort of areas are you really needing people in there?
Oh, lots of areas. But I'm completely honest. Look, Dunedin, the majority of Wellington, Nelson. We've got a really solid team in Christchurch. We're now we've got so much demand in Hamilton, in the Waikato region, so really need more franchisees there. But there's also other little, I guess, smaller key spots for us, or for myself, where Palmerston North, we've got one franchisee in Palmerston North, but the demand there is right now for 4, constantly, and they're relatively new franchisees in some of these smaller areas having to turn their leads off. So we need more franchisees there. Another one's Fielding. I've got a guy in Fielding. Again, he's very rarely taking leads. He hasn't even been at for Jim's Mowing. He's been there I think maybe 9 months, and I think he's around 80, 90 regular customers already.
Right.
So we just need more support. We need more franchisees. There's the demand's huge.
Now, the question you get from every prospect will get out of the way is, how much will I make? Now, it's the question that comes up all the time. How much will I earn? So maybe, Donna, just sort of, rather than saying how much they will earn, because there's obviously it's variables that's on them with what they do, sort of like potentially like a range, or what can people do? Maybe you can talk about your own experience because you know yourself. So what can someone who really commits to the system, listens to what the franchisor says in yourself or the other franchisors in New Zealand, what's sort of the typical sort of guy doing and what you can scale up to?
Okay, look, I think you said one thing here that's really important is when a franchisee commits to the business. And it really does come down to that attitude. But if we're to look at numbers, okay, and from week one, you should be making a minimum of $2,000 because we have paid for work guarantee in place. So we will guarantee you $2,000 a week as long as you're prepared to offer free services that you get paid for if needed. Most of the franchisees don't use paid for work guarantee. And if they do, it's really only for a few months. It's for a short period of time. Okay, so that should be the bare minimum. And over time, the way I sort of look at it, as a sole operator trading well on his own, should be able to get around turnover about $1,000 a day. So it comes down to the days they want to work. Obviously, there's going to be a few interruptions, but we do teach you how to work around the weather. A lot of people's perception of mowing is it's a seasonal business. It certainly isn't. In my business, we actually made more money in winter. That was because, with 300 regulars, we're chasing our tail on a 2 weekly frequency, just trying to keep up with the lawn mowing. Although I had a gardening component to my business, in those winter months where I pushed the 2 weekly back to 3 or 4 weekly, which we would do deliberately, we could have the whole team working on more lucrative gardening projects. But look, the way I see a sole operator, if you're hitting $1,000 a day, and I know lots and lots of franchisees are, that's a pretty good goal or target you should look to sort of achieving. At that point, look, you're gonna go past that number, you're gonna drop past underneath that number also, but you might want to look at scaling your business or other options within your business at that point. So it really comes down to the person, it comes down to the attitude. If you stick to what's that training, that's all I did. I went to the training, I stuck to it. I think I had a very good work ethic. My goal was I was going to work harder than as hard as I could. I'm not going to say anybody else. There's a lot of hard workers out there, but I was going to work as hard as I could. I was going to make sure I was busy every single day, and I was just going to keep going until I got to a stage in my business where I was ready to scale. So I made a lot of sacrifices at the start. I was working 7 days a week, but it did get me into a position where I could cut it back to 5 and have a very lucrative business.
Yeah, it's a great ROI business, for what you pay in to get into Jim's Mowing with what you can potentially make, if you follow the system. It's a really good return on investment compared to a lot of other franchise systems and other home service businesses. And plus, you mentioned before earlier, we'll reiterate this again, it's a flat fee. So, if you're the sole trader, doing that, or if you're someone with, like yourself, 6 staff, 300 regs, you're paying the same fee every month, depending on how many leads you obviously take. But it's pretty much a really fair system that the more you work, the harder you work, that's more, more money you get. So I think a lot of franchise systems, which people need to be aware of, is they do a percentage of revenue. So for example, if you're scaling to 6 or whatever, what's the incentive to work harder if you're just going to be paying more and more to the franchisor? Because if you're earning more revenue, right? So a lot of people would hide money or all that sort of stuff. Whereas if this is a flat fee model.
Oh, exactly. And look, that's probably why, and obviously I don't have a huge amount of knowledge about the other franchises, businesses that are out there. But look, we have franchisees that have been here nearly 30 years in mowing within New Zealand. It's very common to see a lot of the guys here 20 plus. They wouldn't stay that long if they weren't happy with the fee structure and the return they're getting on being part of Jim's Mowing.
Well, that's a great point, Ricky. Let's talk about that thing. So if someone's been 20 years, they've got their clients. Why do you think they stay with Jim's Mowing? Because this is a good question. This is something that Jim always asked himself when he was thinking like, why would I stay with this system? So just talk about maybe why do people stay with gyms for 20, 30 years, even though they've got maybe their clients after 1 year being in business? Why are they still here after 20 years?
Yeah, look, I know a lot of these guys and they're very passionate about the brand. They love the Jim's Mowing community that we create. A lot of that's through our franchisee meetings. They love being able to, I guess, support a lot of the new franchisees that they see on the road. Most of these guys are trainers, as well. They like giving back. Okay. There's also a lot of other things. The return on your fees. I'm constantly uploading our preferred suppliers. So there's always discounts on equipment, just all sorts of things that we can provide as well as part of the fees that franchisees are paying. Also, they still have to replace customers. Most of their customers are just through referrals, but again, they understand the brand so well and how to leverage this brand to maximize their turnover, with very little effort for them. Some of these guys, they know that they can leave at 8:30 in the morning. They mainly focus on mowing when they've been at gyms for quite some time. Gardening can get quite physical, and you can certainly do it for a number of years, but after a while, and especially I find with these experienced franchisees, they just stick to mowing. They know that they can leave at 8:30 in the morning and probably be at the pub at 3:30, 3:35 in the afternoon. Very predictable days.
Now, you mentioned brand because what does that brand mean to you? Does it just mean from your perspective, like, they're driving around and you get people walking up to them, it's easy to convert or you can charge a bit more? What does the word brand mean? Because I think it's really, really important. And I do think that when people look at multiple options, I do think brand should come into it because I think, I'll give you an example. When we do marketing or whatever, like people see gyms mowing, they're more inclined to click through, or they're more inclined to use as if they've used another gyms before. So you mentioned brand a bit there. Do you want to talk about it from your perspective?
When I think of a brand, and especially the Jim's Mowing brand, is trust is the first thing that comes to mind. Look, I deal with, and we still have complaints. Don't get me wrong, and I deal with a lot of the customer complaints that we have coming through within my region. Look, the first thing is they know that they can talk to someone if something goes wrong. We've got the work guarantee. It's always going to be fixed, whether it's through the franchisee itself or we have to get a third party in, and that very rarely, really happens. In fact, I've never experienced that. The franchisees always manage to find a resolution with the customer. Look, with the brand also, I mentioned it earlier, and having started a lot of brands myself, just how much you do have to invest to get recognized, okay? The worst thing is, and it's so awkward having to explain yourself, I know that when I get franchise inquiries coming in, and we get a lot of them, okay, probably 20 a day at the moment, is when I call them and I say I'm Ricky from Jim's Mowing, it's not who or where you're from. Okay, they know exactly, although they have inquired, obviously, but that comes through just anyone you're walking through the street with. There's times when I was a franchisee and I always deliberately tried to stay in uniform as much as I could. Whether it's going to the supermarket after work to pick up some groceries, I stayed in uniform. The amount of times I get approached in there, people recognize it. Okay, they trust it, and we follow through with what we say we're going to do.
No, it's really, really important. Now, with new franchisees, like what's like onboard a lot of new franchisees and you see the difference between the ones who maybe struggle to the ones who succeed. So someone coming into this, Ricky, what would you sort of say to them as your best bit of advice, or what things do they need to be aware of before coming into the system?
Well, the first thing is, look, a lot of new franchisees have never run a business before, So the first thing I really try to make clear is the difference between that employee mindset and the mindset of a business owner, and the responsibilities that come with that. Once we clearly have that understanding, it really comes down to attitude. I'm always looking for a few key things. It's the communication skills. Another one that's really overlooked, and it's very simple, is the person friendly? We're in a sales business here, effectively. You're going to get job leads. You're going to have customers come up to you on a weekly basis. You've still got to sell your services to this customer. So not everyone's a natural salesperson, but if they've got the right attitude, they're disciplined, and they're going to take on board the advice that we give, which is tested over 30 odd years here. We're not just making it up off the cuff. It works, right?
Yeah.
I fitted into the system myself. And although, I probably had a bit of a sales background there also with my old industry, I just followed what was that training, and it just, I put my own twist on a few things. But purely by being friendly and likable, people buy from people they like, right? Amount of times you probably go into a retail outlet, you're looking around and you just get a funny vibe from that person. You're just finding the first exit out the door. Okay. So the more likable you are, follow our system, you're generally going to convert really well. A successful franchisee.
Absolutely. And I will say, if you're coming into Ricky's region or any mowing region in New Zealand, the amount of support that you provide to new franchisee, which I've seen firsthand, is quite superb. Like, they're not just coming in and you're left alone. You're right involved with like quoting, sending through jobs, what I do here, and you're always on every day pretty much with new franchisees and existing franchisees, really supporting them with any queries.
Yeah. I'm available 7 days a week. Okay. The franchisees of my region are my customers. Okay. I'm certainly not their boss at all. They're paying me fees. And they're your boss. Yeah, I work for them. So, and especially with new franchisees, look, I remember when I first started, okay, there was some areas I was really quite intimidated by, and that was quoting was one of them. Okay. And so that's the common thing I see with a lot of franchisees is when they start, they are a little bit nervous about the quoting thing. That's one thing I really do provide a lot of support with. And that's on a daily basis. So when a new franchisee goes live in the system, I get them when they're doing their site visits with the customers, when they start getting job leads coming through. I just get them sending the photos through on my WhatsApp, and then I'll help them write these quotes. And there's no end date on that. It's until they settle in and they feel comfortable with their quote writing and they're converting well. Look, the support's ongoing. Okay. So, like I say, new franchisees, we're talking daily, multiple times a day. What I notice is they start reaching out less as they feel more comfortable. And then I might only be hearing every couple of weeks. And then it sort of becomes monthly after a few months, They might reach out if there's a problematic job or something's gone wrong. And I'm always there, 7 days a week.
Absolutely. And do you want to talk about now the training as well? So what's involved with the training? So obviously there's heaps of people from different backgrounds who come to Jim's Mowing. You came from a completely different background, and you might, and then it can be, can I be trained in this thing? And people worry about the technical side of it. So maybe do you want to talk about the training aspect of it?
Yeah, look, I'm quite involved in the induction training that we have here in New Zealand. So we have our induction training it's with every 7-8 weeks over there in New Zealand. And so all franchisees from all divisions will come into Auckland and they'll do the 2 days of generic training. So if we go back a step, and this is a lot of people's first business that they've owned. So we do cover the business training. We've got all these systems here at Jim's Group that are specifically designed to operate our franchise business. So at the induction training, we cover all of that and make sure that everyone has a good understanding of it. We cover the customer service levels. We've got a bookkeeper that comes in. Joel, you look after and present the marketing side of things and how franchisees can be proactive, which is a very important part. The big difference I see in successful franchisees versus franchisees that might be struggling, because look, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. There are some franchisees that do struggle. The guys that are doing well aren't relying on job leads. They're actively out there promoting themselves and chasing new business. Their whole mindset is the leads are just a bonus. From the induction training, if we go into the mowing side of things, on the third day there, we've got a mowing specific day. I run the day and we dig a lot deeper into everything to do with mowing, the quoting, the scheduling, the different types of customers, the equipment, strategies around building your mowing business, the way we adjust things for each season, the services there, how we approach that, how we promote those services in different seasons, absolutely everything that you can do and can think about for mowing. And it's also a really good day on that mowing specific day where I find that a lot of the new franchisees that might have been quite quiet on the first 2 days because we're in a much bigger group. Once that group reduces in size and we're only going to talk about mowing, they really come out of their shell and start asking a lot of questions, which is fantastic.
That's good. It's good to know. And what you said is really key. Leads will come, but you've got to do your proactive side as well. If you just sit there expecting all the leads to come to build your business, it's not really going to happen. So don't come in that sort of expectation. We don't want you to come with that expectation, which is why we're doing this information sharing like this, because I think we want to make sure that you're aware of that. But the people who do understand that they're proactive, but the leads will come as well. At the same time, you're doing both, you're going to have a good business.
Oh, definitely.
And what was the best way for you to generate new business back in the day? So when you were doing it, what would you sort of say to new franchisees? So the ones who are proactive, like yourself, and like the ones that you see who do really, really well, what are the things that they're doing? So maybe do you want to explain a little bit about the system that they're following?
with the settings in the system, or just my approach?
Just your approach to new business, yeah. Because I think that's like, so the ones who are doing really well now, like, are they going out, for example, are they going out to like local real estate agents and introducing themselves, or what are they doing differently to generate that work?
One thing you will see in common with these franchise also is, look, we have a star rating system here in Jim's Group. Is I can guarantee you our every top franchisee is probably 4.9 stars and above. Most of them are 5 stars. So what their main focus is customer service and providing an excellent job. And what happens from there, and that's what happened to my business. I was obsessed by the star rating, like absolutely obsessed by it. I did get complaints also, but I basically created a system for myself where I'd reduce the chance of getting a complaint by about 80-90%. I treat every single job lead that came in like it was a potential complaint. So what happened from that is everything became very systematic, and it kept me very disciplined with my business. But to grow the business, what my main focus was referrals. Okay. And what I realized is that when I started off and I was getting leads that might be a 15-minute drive in one direction and another one sort of 10 minutes the other way, that I wanted to really focus on condensing my run, because we don't make money while we're driving. So I was very, very conscious about picking up next door neighbors. I was doing a lot of networking. I'd have a referral incentive system with my existing clients where they'd get a discount if they referred me to a new regular customer. And what started to happen from there is, because look, people talk, right? And they talk about, obviously having a good experience. They're going to talk more about a bad experience naturally. But I was starting to pick up lots of neighbors. There was parts of my run. There was one specifically I do remember in my first territory that I had. There was 7 customers and we didn't have to move the van once, right? There was 4 in a row. There's 2 across the street. There was 1 gap and there was another one there, creating 7, and that's what I was really focused on, is referrals, networking. I didn't go to the BNI networking. I was thinking about it. I definitely recommend it to a lot of our franchisees that are needing to build their business. But I was more just talking to people and getting to know my customers, because this is the one thing that you don't realize a lot of the time is some of your customers are big decision makers in their line of work. I've had one customer who ended up being my best customer actually, and that's actually the property that I met you, Joel, out on the on that waterfront property.
Yeah, a really nice place. Yeah.
Yeah. So that particular customer, I met him when I first did the quote, but I hadn't seen him probably for about 3 or 4 months, because he's at work, right? So I was just coming in doing his job while he's at work. I bumped into him one time and we got talking, and look, I was just asking him out of it, what do you do for work? And out of that one conversation, I realized that he owned a pretty large concrete company that was actually just down the road from where I lived at the time. But he owned a lot of commercial properties as well. And he asked me, are you looking for more work? What's the area that you cover? And I was like, well, this is the area I'm targeting. Within my, what we call our local area map, or Jim's, which is a smaller, more targeted map, he had 6 commercial properties he handed over to me in that one conversation. There's lots of customers that you don't know what they do. So you just got to start a conversation with them. And that led to a lot of work for me.
It's a great point, Ricky. And I think sometimes franchisees forget that. They don't underestimate the person you're talking to. You don't know who they are, what they own, who they know, all that sort of stuff. And I hear this story a lot of from franchisees, exactly what you're saying then. And some customer, they'll be an unassuming customer. The next thing you know, they've got 10 factories, or they're the head of this thing or something like that. So you're right. Just never take any customer for granted, because you don't know where it may lead. But I was going to say, Ricky, with doing the business overall, what's been the best part of it for you? Like, someone completely outside of this industry, you've come into the industry now. What's the best part of being in the industry? And what would you sort of say to someone that's been looking at maybe doing this and maybe jumping from corporate or something like that? What have you found the best part of doing what you're doing now to be?
Well, we see it all the time, right? So look, people initially make an inquiry to join Jim's Mowing for a reason. They are looking for change. So look, we have a vast variety of people that join Jim's Mowing. There's corporates. I've actually got a phone call on Thursday with the guy who was the ex-CEO of a publicly listed company
Wow.
here in New Zealand, who's looking for change, right? So he's he's made his money. He still wants to be active. He just wants to get out there and still very much a people person, and just enjoys being outside and doing that sort of work. So there's from all ends of the scale, there's different types of people that look to join gyms. What I find for myself is what I found, and this is the reason why I ended up selling my business, was for a couple of reasons. Don't get me wrong, I built up the high value asset to sell off. Okay. But I started enjoying the journey and going on the journey with new franchisees. I love seeing them start not knowing how to write a quote or how to use a line trimmer or how to use or a whippersmith, you can call them over there at Grey, or a mower, and having no idea, and going through our training program, starting to get confidence and seeing some of these guys starting to build a major business. I get a lot of personal satisfaction from that. I like knowing that if someone's struggling, they can call me. They're not afraid to call me. They know that I'm going to get back to them. Just like a job lead comes in. Okay, and this is the way I look at the franchisee support. Is when, as a franchisee, you have to call your customer within 2 hours. Okay, when a franchisee contacts me for support, it's generally within minutes, if not within 2 hours. I treat it exactly the same way. So that's where I get a lot of satisfaction, is seeing people looking for a change and setting goals and achieving those goals. Look, some people don't achieve the goals. We've got to be realistic here, okay? But the guys that do, for me, that's a lot of satisfaction that I get in this role.
Yeah, and that's why we want people to listen to this, do their research, because we want you to come in and succeed. So you got to know it's going to be hard work, but if you follow the system and listen to franchisors like Ricky, you can succeed, but you've got to put in the hard work. But Ricky, thank you very much for your time today as well. We really do appreciate it. We're going to do this again in a couple of months. But a few technical issues today. So if you're listening to this, we've had a few technical issues with Zoom, which we never really do. So we're doing this on the phone and trying to sync up the audio. So sorry for the earlier part of that, Ricky, but we appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward to checking in a couple of months.
No problem. No, thanks for your time, Joel.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the episode of the More Than Just Mowing podcast by Jim's Mowing. If you do need help with your local gardening expert, please give us a call on 131 546 for Australia, 0800 454 654 for New Zealand, or head to jimsmowing.com.au or jimsmowing.co.nz. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you leave us a review as well, wherever you consume your podcast. We appreciate your support. And until next episode, we hope you have a great week.